Marcus Wellington walked through the airport terminal with his small carry-on bag rolling behind him. He was tired, very tired. The past week had been filled with back-to-back meetings, conference calls that lasted for hours, and presentations that seemed to never end. All he wanted now was to get on the plane, sit down, and maybe close his eyes for a few hours during the flight from New York to Los Angeles. He was dressed simply. A pair of comfortable jeans, a dark blue hoodie, and his favorite sneakers. After wearing suits and ties all week, this felt like freedom. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't look like a man who ran a technology company worth billions of dollars. He just looked like a regular guy heading home. Marcus had flown this route many times before. First class was something he had earned through years of hard work. He remembered the days when he could barely afford economy seats, when he would save for months just to visit his family. Now things were different, but he never forgot where he came from. When his boarding group was called, Marcus grabbed his bag and walked down the jet bridge. The flight attendants stood at the entrance of the plane, greeting passengers with bright smiles. Marcus smiled back and nodded as he entered. He found his seat easily. Seat 2A, a window seat in the first row of first class. Perfect. He lifted his bag into the overhead compartment and settled into his seat. The leather was soft and comfortable. He pulled out his phone to send a quick message to his wife, letting her know he was about to take off. Around him, other first-class passengers were getting settled too. A businessman in an expensive suit sat across the aisle. An older couple took seats 2 rows back. Everyone seemed relaxed and ready for the flight. That's when she appeared. Rebecca Morrison had been a flight attendant for 12 years. She walked down the aisle with confident steps, her uniform perfectly pressed, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes scanned the first-class cabin, checking on passengers, making sure everyone was in their correct seats. When her eyes landed on Marcus, she stopped. Her smile faded just a little. She looked at him, then looked at the seat number above his head, then looked at him again. There was something in her expression that Marcus recognized immediately. He had seen that look before many times in his life. Rebecca walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps. When she reached his row, she bent down slightly and spoke in a voice that was loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Excuse me, sir," she said with a tone that wasn't quite friendly. "I think there might be a mistake with your seat." Marcus looked up at her calmly. "No mistake," he said quietly. "This is my seat." Rebecca's smile became tighter. "Are you sure? Economy class is toward the back of the plane." It's easy to get confused sometimes, the words hung in the air. A few passengers nearby turned their heads to look. The businessman across the aisle glanced over with curiosity. The older couple a few rows back were now paying attention. Marcus felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. He took a slow breath and reached into his pocket, pulling out his boarding pass. He held it up for Rebecca to see. "Seat 2A, he said, keeping his voice steady. "First class." Rebecca took the boarding pass from his hand and examined it closely. Too closely. She held it up to the light as if checking for something fake. She turned it over, looking at both sides. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She said, still staring at the pass. "Sometimes there are system errors. Computer glitches. You know how technology can be." Marcus knew exactly what was happening. After 45 years of living as a black man in America, he could read these situations perfectly. But he remained calm. Getting angry wouldn't help. It never did. "There's no error," he said simply. "That's my seat." Rebecca finally handed back the boarding pass, but she wasn't done. "Can I see your ID, please?" Marcus paused. She hadn't asked anyone else for identification. The businessman in the suit had boarded right before him, and Rebecca had simply smiled and welcomed him aboard. No questions, no verification, but Marcus reached for his wallet anyway. He pulled out his driver's license and handed it to her. She studied it carefully. "Marcus Wellington," she read aloud. Then she looked at the boarding pass again, comparing the names. "And do you have the credit card you used to purchase this ticket?" Now other passengers were definitely watching. The cabin had grown quieter. People were pretending to look at their phones or adjust their seatbelts, but Marcus could feel their attention on him. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his patience beginning to wear thin. "Just following procedure," Rebecca said with a forced smile. "We have to make sure everything is in order. I'm sure you understand." Marcus pulled out his wallet again and showed her his credit card. His name was printed clearly on the front. Marcus Wellington. Same as his ID. Same as his boarding pass. Rebecca looked at the card for a long moment as if hoping to find some discrepancy. When she found nothing wrong, she handed everything back to him. Okay, she said, though her tone suggested she still wasn't entirely convinced. But you know, some people try to sneak into first class. We have to be careful. She said it casually as if it were a normal thing to say, as if she hadn't just implied that Marcus might be one of those people trying to cheat the system. As if she hadn't just humiliated him in front of a plane full of strangers. Marcus took his documents and put them away. He looked out the window, trying to push down the anger and hurt that were rising in his chest. He had paid for this seat. He had every right to be here. But somehow he was being made to feel like a criminal. Rebecca finally walked away, moving down the aisle to check on other passengers. But Marcus noticed she glanced back at him several times as if keeping watch. The businessman across the aisle caught Marcus's eye and gave him a sympathetic look. The older couple in the back whispered to each other. A younger woman 2 rows up had her phone out and seemed to be typing something quickly. Marcus sat back in his seat and closed his eyes. The flight hadn't even taken off yet, and he already felt exhausted all over again. He wondered if the next 6 hours would be peaceful, or if this was just the beginning of a very long flight. As the plane began to fill with more passengers, Marcus tried to focus on something else. He thought about his family waiting for him at home. He thought about the work he had accomplished that week. He tried to remind himself that he had nothing to prove to anyone, but deep down he knew this moment would stay with him. It always did. These small acts of discrimination, these tiny cuts that happened so often they almost felt normal. Almost. But not quite. Never quite. The plane finally took off, climbing into the sky above New York. Marcus watched the city get smaller through his window. Usually, he loved this part. The feeling of leaving the ground, of moving through the clouds. Today it just felt like an escape that wasn't happening fast enough. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers around him started to relax. Some pulled out laptops. Others reclined their seats and closed their eyes. Marcus tried to do the same, but he couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling from earlier. Rebecca appeared in the aisle again, pushing a cart. It was time for drinks. Marcus watched as she moved from row to row, her smile bright and friendly as she spoke to each passenger. "What can I get for you today?" she asked the businessman across from Marcus. Her voice was warm and welcoming. "Scotch on the rocks, please," the man replied. "Excellent choice," Rebecca said, preparing his drink with care. She placed it on his tray table with a small napkin and a package of nuts. "Here you are, sir. Enjoy." She moved to the next row. "And for you folks." The couple behind Marcus ordered wine. Rebecca chatted with them pleasantly, asking if they were traveling for business or pleasure. She laughed at something the husband said. Everything seemed so normal and friendly. Then she came to Marcus. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "What would you like?" she asked, her tone noticeably cooler. "Orange juice, please," Marcus said politely. Rebecca nodded and poured the juice, but she didn't add a napkin. She didn't offer nuts or pretzels like she had with the other passengers. She simply placed the plastic cup on his tray table and moved on without another word. Marcus stared at the cup for a moment. It was a small thing, such a small thing, but it was another reminder that he was being treated differently. An hour into the flight, meal service began. Rebecca came around with menus, explaining the options to each passenger. When she got to the businessman, she spent time describing each dish in detail. "We have a wonderful herb-crusted chicken today," she said enthusiastically. "Or if you prefer seafood, the salmon is absolutely delicious. We also have a vegetarian pasta option." The businessman chose the chicken. Rebecca smiled and made a note on her pad. When she got to Marcus, she barely looked at him. "Chicken, fish, or pasta?" she said quickly. "What kind of fish?" Marcus asked. Rebecca sighed as if the question annoyed her. "Salmon. I'll have the salmon, please." She wrote it down and moved on without asking how he wanted it prepared or if he had any dietary restrictions. Questions she had asked every other passenger. When the meals arrived 30 minutes later, everyone in first class received their food promptly. everyone except Marcus. He watched as Rebecca served the rows behind him, then the rows in front. She walked past him 3 times without making eye contact. Finally, after everyone else had their meals, she brought Marcus his tray. The salmon looked dried out as if it had been sitting under the heat lamp too long. The vegetables on the side were cold. "Here," she said, placing the tray down with a small thud. Marcus looked at the food but said nothing. He wasn't even hungry anymore. Another flight attendant was working in first class that day. His name was James, and he was younger than Rebecca, probably in his late 20s. Marcus noticed that James kept glancing his way with a concerned expression. After Rebecca walked back to the galley, James approached Marcus quietly. "Sir, is everything okay with your meal?" he asked softly. "That doesn't look right. I can get you another one if you'd like." Marcus appreciated the kindness in James's voice. "Thank you," he said. "But it's fine." James hesitated as if he wanted to say more. "If you need anything at all, please let me know. Anything." There was meaning in those words. James had noticed what was happening. He might not say it out loud, but he saw how Rebecca was treating Marcus. "I will," Marcus said. "Thank you." As the flight continued, the pattern repeated itself. When Marcus pressed his call button to ask for a blanket, Rebecca took 15 minutes to respond. When she finally came, she looked irritated. "Yes," she said. "Could I get a blanket, please?" Marcus asked. Rebecca crossed her arms. "The blankets are reserved for our premium passengers." Marcus blinked. "This is first class." "I mean our special premium passengers," she said, emphasizing the words in a way that made her meaning clear. "We have a limited supply." Marcus looked around. He could see blankets on other passengers. The couple 2 rows back both had blankets. The businessman across the aisle had one draped over his lap. "I see other people with blankets," Marcus pointed out calmly. Rebecca's face flushed slightly. "Those were from their personal requests earlier. Like I said, limited supply." She turned and walked away before Marcus could respond. James appeared a few minutes later with a blanket. He didn't say anything, just placed it gently on Marcus's lap with an apologetic look before moving on. Later, when Marcus pulled out his laptop to do some work, Rebecca stopped by his seat again. She leaned over, looking at his screen. "Do you need help understanding the entertainment system?" she asked loudly. Some passengers find it confusing. Marcus had his work open on his laptop. He wasn't even using the entertainment system. "No, thank you. I'm working." "Oh, you have work?" She said it with surprise, as if the concept was unusual. "What do you do?" It was a question she hadn't asked any other passenger. Marcus considered telling her the truth. He imagined her face if he said he was the CEO of a major technology company, but he decided against it. "I work in tech," he said simply. Rebecca said, as if she didn't quite believe him. "Well, if you need help with anything technical, just let me know. I'm pretty good with computers." She walked away and Marcus shook his head slowly. He opened a note on his phone and started documenting everything. The time she questioned his seat, the time she asked for multiple forms of identification, the missing napkin and snacks with his drink, the delayed meal, the blanket incident, the condescending offer to help with technology. He wrote it all down with specific times and details. He had learned over the years that documentation mattered. People often dismissed stories of discrimination as exaggeration or misunderstanding, but facts, times, and specific quotes were harder to ignore. 2 hours before landing, Marcus got up to use the restroom. As he walked back to his seat, he passed by the galley area. The curtain was partially open and he could hear voices inside. Rebecca was talking to James. "I'm telling you, keep an eye on that one in 2A, Rebecca said. "You never know these days. People try all kinds of things." "What do you mean?" James asked. His voice sounded uncomfortable. "You know what I mean," Rebecca said. "Just seems suspicious. Shows up in first class dressed like that. Can barely afford it, probably. Probably used miles or points or something." "He seemed fine to me." James said quietly. Just trust me, Rebecca continued. I've been doing this for 12 years. I can spot the ones who don't belong. Marcus stood frozen in the aisle, listening. The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. The ones who don't belong. He belonged. He had paid for his seat. He had earned his place through hard work and success. But to Rebecca, he would never belong. Not because of anything he had done, but because of the color of his skin. He walked back to his seat slowly. He added what he had just heard to his notes. His hands were shaking slightly as he typed. Not from fear, but from a mixture of anger and sadness. Anger at the injustice. Sadness that this still happened in the world. That no matter what he achieved, some people would always see him as someone who didn't belong. The older couple behind him leaned forward. The wife spoke softly. Excuse me, she said to Marcus. We've been watching what's been happening. It's not right. Not right at all. Her husband nodded in agreement. We're going to say something when we land. That flight attendant's behavior has been appalling. Marcus turned to look at them. Their faces showed genuine concern and anger on his behalf. Thank you, he said quietly. I appreciate that. We have daughters, the wife continued. We raise them to stand up when they see injustice. We should all do the same. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Marcus felt exhausted. The 6-hour flight had felt like 6 days. He hadn't been able to relax, hadn't been able to rest. Every interaction had been a reminder that he was being judged and found wanting. Not because of his character or his actions, but because of assumptions and prejudices. When the plane finally touched down and taxied to the gate, Marcus remained in his seat. He wasn't in a hurry. He had a decision to make. He could just walk off the plane and forget about it. He had dealt with worse things in his life. He could let it go. But as he sat there, he thought about all the other people who might sit in this seat after him. All the other passengers who might face the same treatment. People who might not have his resources or his confidence. People who might be too afraid to speak up. The plane came to a stop. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers began gathering their belongings. Marcus made his decision. He would not let it go. Not this time. Marcus waited until most passengers had left the plane before he stood up. He grabbed his carry-on bag from the overhead compartment and walked toward the exit. Rebecca stood near the door, saying goodbye to passengers with that same bright smile she had used all flight. The same smile she had never quite given to him. Thank you for flying with us, she said cheerfully to each person passing by. When Marcus reached her, their eyes met. For just a moment, her smile faltered. Maybe she thought he would just walk past. Maybe she thought he would let everything go and disappear into the crowd of travelers. I need to speak with the supervisor, Marcus said calmly. Rebecca's confident expression flickered. A supervisor? Is there a problem? Yes, Marcus said simply. There is, her face hardened slightly. I can try to help you with whatever the issue is. No, Marcus replied. I need to speak with a supervisor. Now, please. Other passengers were still filing out, and a few glanced over curiously. Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Wait here, she said, her voice lacking its earlier warmth. She disappeared into the plane, and Marcus stood near the door. James, the other flight attendant, approached him quietly. I'm sorry about what happened today, James said in a low voice. It wasn't right. Marcus looked at the younger man and saw genuine concern in his eyes. Thank you for being kind during the flight, I noticed. I should have said something, James said, looking down. I should have spoken up more. You did what you could, Marcus told him. Sometimes that's all we can do. A few minutes later, Rebecca returned with a woman in a different uniform. She wore a blazer with the airline's logo and had an air of authority about her. Her name tag read Patricia Chen, flight supervisor. Good afternoon, Patricia said, extending her hand to Marcus. I understand you wanted to speak with me. Marcus shook her hand. Yes. Is there somewhere private we can talk? Of course. Follow me, please. Patricia led Marcus off the plane and down the jet bridge to a small office near the gate. Rebecca followed behind them, her confident smile now completely gone. She looked nervous, which told Marcus she knew exactly what this was about. Inside the office, Patricia gestured for Marcus to sit. Rebecca stood near the door, arms crossed. Patricia pulled out a notepad and pen. Now, Mr. Wellington. Marcus Wellington. Patricia wrote down his name. Mr. Wellington, please tell me what happened. Marcus took a breath and began. He spoke calmly and clearly, recounting every incident from the flight. He told her about being questioned when he first sat down, about being asked to show his ID and credit card when no one else was asked. He described the missing napkins and snacks, the delayed meal, the blanket incident, and the condescending comments about needing help with technology. Then he pulled out his phone and showed Patricia his notes. Every incident was documented with specific times and exact quotes. And finally, Marcus said, I overheard her speaking to James in the galley. She said I was suspicious and that I was one of the ones who didn't belong. Rebecca's face went pale. I never said that. He's lying. Patricia held up her hand. Please, Miss Morrison, let him finish, Marcus continued. She told the other flight attendant to keep an eye on me. She implied that I couldn't really afford the seat, that I probably used miles or points. That's taken completely out of context, Rebecca protested. I was just doing my job, being careful. We have procedures. Did you ask any other first-class passenger to show multiple forms of identification? Marcus asked, looking directly at her. Rebecca hesitated. Sometimes we have to verify. Did you ask anyone else on today's flight? Silence. Patricia looked at Rebecca with a serious expression. Ms. Morrison, did you ask any other passenger for verification today? Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Not exactly, but yes or no? No, but this was a special circumstance. What made it special? Patricia asked. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. They all knew the answer, even if she wouldn't say it out loud. There was a knock on the door. Patricia opened it, and James stood outside with an older couple. They were the passengers who had been sitting behind Marcus. Excuse me, the older woman said. We heard this gentleman was filing a complaint. We'd like to add our statement if that's possible. Patricia's eyebrows rose. You witnessed something? We witnessed the entire flight, the husband said firmly. And what we saw was completely unacceptable. Patricia invited them in. The office was getting crowded now, but no one seemed to care. The older woman introduced herself as Helen Carter, and her husband as Robert. They had been married for 40 years and had flown hundreds of times. They knew what good service looked like, and they knew what discrimination looked like. That flight attendant treated Mr. Wellington differently from every other passenger in first class, Helen said, pointing at Rebecca. We watched it happen from start to finish. The way she questioned him at the beginning, the way she ignored him during service, the way she spoke to him. It was disgraceful, Robert nodded. We've never seen anything like it. And we've flown a lot. This wasn't about procedures or protocols. This was about prejudice, plain and simple. Rebecca's face turned red. I was just doing my job. You don't understand the pressures we face, the things we have to watch for. What exactly were you watching for? Helen asked sharply. A well-dressed man sitting quietly in his assigned seat? Working on his laptop? Minding his own business? What about that required special watching? Patricia was writing everything down quickly. Her expression had grown more serious with each statement. This wasn't just one passenger's complaint anymore. This was multiple witnesses confirming a pattern of behavior. Is there anyone else who can corroborate these events? Patricia asked. I can, James said quietly from where he stood near the door. Everyone turned to look at him. Rebecca's eyes went wide. James, don't, Rebecca said. We're colleagues. We work together. James looked uncomfortable, but he stood his ground. That's exactly why I need to speak up. I saw what happened today. I saw how you treated Mr. Wellington compared to other passengers. And I heard what you said in the galley. You're twisting things, Rebecca said, her voice rising. I was trying to be professional to maintain safety. Safety from what? Marcus asked quietly. From a man sitting in his seat? From someone working on his computer? What exactly was the threat? Rebecca had no answer. She looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. The confident flight attendant from earlier had completely disappeared. Now she just looked cornered and desperate. Patricia set down her pen. Ms. Morrison, I'm going to ask you to wait outside for a moment. Please. But I should be here to defend myself, Rebecca protested. Outside, now. Rebecca left the office, closing the door harder than necessary. Patricia turned to the others. Mr. Wellington, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, James, I want to sincerely apologize for what happened today. This is not the standard of service we aim to provide, and it's certainly not how we expect our employees to treat any passenger. Apologies are good, Robert said. But what happens next? Does she get a warning and continue treating people this way? Patricia shook her head. I can't discuss personnel matters, but I can assure you this will be taken very seriously. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Do you? Helen asked pointedly. Because from what we saw today, it looked like she was pretty comfortable behaving this way. Like maybe she's done it before. The words hung in the air. Patricia's expression shifted slightly. It was a small change, but Marcus caught it. The look of someone realizing something important. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, Patricia said, stepping outside. Through the small window in the door, Marcus could see Patricia making a phone call. She was speaking quickly, her free hand gesturing emphatically. This was bigger than a simple complaint now. This was turning into something the airline needed to handle carefully. Patricia came back inside a few minutes later. Mr. Wellington, I'm going to need your contact information. Our corporate office will want to follow up with you directly. We'll also need statements from Mr. and Mrs. Carter and from James. She collected everyone's information, taking careful notes. When she asked Marcus for his phone number and email, she also asked for his frequent flyer number. It's on my boarding pass, Marcus said, pulling it out again. Patricia entered the number into her tablet. Her eyes widened slightly as information loaded on her screen. She looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. Is something wrong? Marcus asked. No, not at all, Patricia said, but her voice had changed. There was a new level of concern in it. She was looking at his account, seeing his diamond status, seeing the hundreds of flights he had taken with their airline over the years. She was realizing this wasn't just any passenger. This was someone who had been loyal to their airline for a long time. Someone who flew first class regularly. Someone who was important to their business, but more than that. When she processed the name Marcus Wellington fully, something clicked. She had heard that name before. She just couldn't quite remember where. We'll be in touch very soon, Patricia said. Again, I sincerely apologize for your experience today. Helen and Robert shook Marcus's hand before leaving. You did the right thing by speaking up, Helen told him. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. James left next, giving Marcus a respectful nod. Finally, it was just Marcus and Patricia in the office. Mr. Wellington, Patricia said carefully, I want you to know that we take these matters extremely seriously. You'll be hearing from our executive team soon. Marcus nodded and stood to leave. As he walked out of the office, he saw Rebecca sitting in a chair down the hallway. She looked smaller now, less confident. She didn't look at him as he passed. Marcus walked through the airport toward baggage claim. His phone buzzed with messages from his wife asking if he had landed safely. He texted back that he had and that he would explain everything when he got home. As he waited for his bag, Marcus felt tired but also lighter somehow. He had spoken up. He had documented everything. He had witnesses who supported his account. Whatever happened next was out of his hands, but at least he had done something. At least he hadn't stayed silent. Patricia Chen sat in her office at the airport long after Marcus Wellington had left. She stared at her computer screen, reading and rereading the complaint report she had just filed. Something about the name Marcus Wellington kept nagging at her. She had heard it before. She was sure of it. She typed the name into a search engine on her computer. The results loaded and her heart sank. Marcus Wellington wasn't just a frequent flyer. He wasn't just a diamond status passenger. He was the CEO and founder of Wellington Technologies, one of the largest technology companies in the country. His company was worth billions. His face appeared in dozens of articles about innovation, business leadership, and technology. Patricia's hand went to her mouth. This was worse than she had thought. Much worse. She scrolled through more results. Marcus Wellington had been named one of the most influential business leaders of the year. He sat on the boards of several major corporations. He was known for his philanthropy work, especially in education and technology access for underserved communities. He had been interviewed on major news programs and had spoken at international conferences. And one of his company's biggest clients was the airline Patricia worked for. She felt sick. She quickly opened another system on her computer, checking the airline's vendor contracts. There it was. Wellington Technologies provided the software platform that ran the airline's entire booking system, their operations management, their customer service interface, everything. The contract was worth $50 million per year, and it was up for renewal in 3 months. Patricia picked up her phone with shaking hands and called her regional manager. Then her regional manager called the vice president of operations. Within an hour, the complaint had reached the desk of Jennifer Hastings, the CEO of the airline. Jennifer was in a meeting when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. She read the brief summary on her tablet and immediately ended her meeting. She called an emergency conference with her executive team. "We have a serious situation," Jennifer told the 5 executives gathered in her office. She explained what had happened on the flight, who Marcus Wellington was, and what his company meant to the airline. The chief financial officer looked pale. "Our entire system runs on Wellington Technologies' platform. If he pulls that contract, and it's not just about the contract," Jennifer interrupted. "This is about doing what's right. Even if Marcus Wellington was not who he is, what happened on that flight was completely unacceptable. But yes, the business implications make this even more urgent." The head of human resources was already pulling up Rebecca Morrison's employment file. "I need to review her history," she said, typing quickly. Jennifer picked up her phone. "I'm calling him directly. Right now." She dialed the number Patricia had provided. The phone rang 3 times before Marcus answered. "This is Marcus." "Mr. Wellington, this is Jennifer Hastings. I'm the CEO of the airline. I'm calling about the incident on your flight today." There was a pause. Marcus had just walked into his house. His wife looked at him with concern, seeing the exhaustion on his face. He held up one finger, signaling he needed to take this call. "Ms. Hastings," Marcus said carefully. "First, I want to offer you my sincere and personal apology," Jennifer said. "What happened to you today was completely unacceptable. There is no excuse for it." "Thank you for calling," Marcus replied. His voice was neutral, measured. He wasn't going to make this easy. "I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously," Jennifer continued. "I've already launched a full investigation. The flight attendant in question has been suspended pending the outcome. We're reviewing everything. Ms. Hastings, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I wasn't who I am, would you be calling me right now? If I was just a regular passenger, would the CEO of the airline be personally apologizing?" The question hit hard. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "That's a fair question," she said honestly. "And it points to exactly the problem we need to fix. Every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are. The fact that your status or identity should matter in how we respond is part of what's wrong." Marcus felt a small amount of respect for her honesty. "So what happens now?" "I'd like to meet with you in person if you're willing," Jennifer said. "Not to pressure you or try to smooth things over, but to listen, to understand your experience, and to discuss how we can make sure this never happens to anyone else." "Anyone else," Marcus repeated. "That's the key phrase, isn't it? Because if this happened to me, and I'm someone who can afford good lawyers and who has a platform to speak out, how many other people has it happened to? How many people who don't have those resources? How many people who were too afraid or too tired to complain?" "That's exactly what keeps me up at night now," Jennifer admitted. "Will you meet with me?" Marcus thought about it. He could just walk away. He could cancel his contract with the airline. He could go public with his story and let the consequences fall where they may. But would that actually change anything? Would that help the next person who sat in his seat? "I'll meet with you," Marcus said. "But I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge or compensation. This is about systemic change. If we're going to have this conversation, it needs to be about fixing the real problems." "I understand," Jennifer said. "And I agree. When can we meet?" They scheduled a meeting for 2 days later at the airline's headquarters. After Marcus hung up, his wife immediately wrapped him in a hug. "What happened?" she asked. Marcus told her everything. About Rebecca's treatment of him. About the complaint, about the CEO calling. His wife listened with growing anger and sadness. "After everything you've accomplished," she said. "After everything you've built. And you still get treated like that." "That's the point," Marcus said quietly. "It doesn't matter what I've accomplished. To someone like Rebecca, I'll always be suspicious. I'll always be someone who doesn't belong." Their teenage son walked into the room. "Dad, you're trending on social media." Marcus looked at his son in confusion. "What?" His son held up his phone. "Someone posted about what happened on your flight. It's going viral." Marcus took the phone and read the post. It was from Helen Carter, the older woman who had witnessed everything. She had written a detailed account of what she had seen, describing the discrimination Marcus had faced without initially naming him. The post had been shared thousands of times already. People were commenting, sharing their own stories of discrimination, expressing outrage. "I didn't want this to become a public spectacle," Marcus said. "Too late for that," his son replied. "People are angry, Dad. They're calling out the airline. Some people are saying they're going to boycott." Marcus handed back the phone. This was spinning larger than he had anticipated. He had just wanted to file a complaint, to make sure Rebecca faced consequences, to try to prevent it from happening again. He hadn't expected it to explode across social media. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, the executive team was dealing with the fallout. The head of human resources had finished reviewing Rebecca Morrison's file, and what she found was disturbing. "This isn't her first complaint," she told Jennifer. "She's had 7 previous incidents involving passengers of color, 7 over the past 5 years. 7? Jennifer said in disbelief. "Why wasn't anything done?" "The complaints went to different supervisors. Some were dismissed as misunderstandings. Others were quietly settled with vouchers or miles. The pattern was never connected because no one was looking at the full picture." Jennifer felt anger rising in her chest. "So she's been doing this for years and we've been letting her get away with it?" "It looks that way." "Who were the supervisors who dismissed the complaints?" The head of HR pulled up the names. Jennifer recognized all of them. Some were still with the company. Some had been promoted. "They all need to be held accountable too," Jennifer said. "This isn't just about one flight attendant. This is about a system that allowed this to continue. A culture that didn't take these complaints seriously enough." The head of public relations rushed into the office. "We have a problem. The story is all over social media. People are connecting Marcus Wellington's name to the incident. They know who he is now. The business press is picking it up. We're getting calls from journalists." Jennifer closed her eyes and took a breath. "Draft a statement. We need to get ahead of this. I want complete transparency. No corporate speak, no minimizing. We acknowledge what happened. We take responsibility and we commit to real change." "Are you sure?" the PR head asked. "Usually in these situations, we try to keep things quiet, settle privately." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "We're done with quiet settlements that don't fix anything. We're going to address this head on." Over the next 24 hours, the story grew bigger. More passengers came forward with their own stories of discrimination on flights. Some involved Rebecca Morrison, others involved different employees. The airline's social media accounts were flooded with comments, most of them critical. A business journalist named Sarah Chen was the first to write a major article connecting all the pieces. She detailed Marcus Wellington's experience, his prominence in the business world, and his company's relationship with the airline. She also uncovered the pattern of previous complaints that had been ignored. The article went viral. Major news outlets picked up the story. It wasn't just about one bad flight attendant anymore. It was about systemic racism in the airline industry. It was about how companies responded to discrimination complaints. It was about accountability. Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists wanted interviews. Other business leaders called to express support. Civil rights organizations reached out wanting to discuss the broader implications. It was overwhelming. The day before his scheduled meeting with Jennifer Hastings, Marcus sat in his home office thinking about what he wanted to say. His initial anger had evolved into something more focused. He saw an opportunity here, not just to punish one person or even one company, but to create real change that could impact thousands of travelers. He thought about all the people who had experienced what he experienced, but had no platform to speak about it. He thought about the fear that must keep people silent. The exhaustion of constantly having to prove you belong in spaces you've earned the right to be in. His wife knocked on his office door and came in with a cup of coffee. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" Marcus took the coffee and smiled at her. "I'm going to try to change things. Really change things. That's my Marcus," she said, kissing the top of his head. "Always thinking bigger." At the airline headquarters, Jennifer Hastings was preparing for the meeting too. She had spent 2 days reviewing policies, reading accounts of discrimination from passengers, and meeting with her team. She knew this meeting would set the tone for everything that came next. Rebecca Morrison had been formally terminated. The investigation had revealed enough evidence to justify immediate dismissal. The supervisors who had dismissed previous complaints were facing disciplinary action, including suspension and mandatory retraining. Some would likely be demoted or let go, but Jennifer knew that wasn't enough. Firing people was easy. Building a better system, creating a culture where discrimination wasn't tolerated, where complaints were taken seriously, where every passenger was treated with dignity, that was the hard part. That was what she hoped to discuss with Marcus Wellington. Marcus arrived at the airline headquarters on a Tuesday morning. The building was modern glass and steel, impressive and intimidating. Security escorted him to the executive floor where Jennifer Hastings was waiting in a conference room. She stood when he entered, extending her hand. "Mr. Wellington, thank you for coming." Marcus shook her hand and sat down. The conference room was elegant, with a long table and a view of the city skyline. Jennifer sat across from him. There were no assistants, no lawyers, no other executives, just the two of them. "I appreciated your honesty on the phone," Marcus began. "The question is whether that honesty extends to real action." Jennifer nodded. "Before we talk about the future, I want to tell you what we've learned from investigating the past. It's not pretty, but you deserve to know the full truth." She opened a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents detailing Rebecca Morrison's employment history, including all 7 previous complaints against her. "Rebecca Morrison had been with us for 12 years, Jennifer said. In that time, 7 passengers filed complaints about discriminatory treatment. All 7 complaints involved passengers of color. Not one resulted in serious discipline." Marcus read through the documents. The complaints were eerily similar to his own experience. Passengers being questioned about their seats, delayed service, condescending treatment, microaggressions that individually might seem small, but together painted a clear picture. Why wasn't anything done? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Several reasons," Jennifer said. "None of them good. The complaints went to different supervisors in different cities. No one connected the pattern. Some supervisors dismissed the complaints as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. Others offered vouchers or miles to make the problem go away quietly. Everyone was more concerned with avoiding publicity than addressing the real issue. And the supervisors who did this? 3 have been terminated. 4 others are suspended pending further investigation. 2 have been demoted. We're reviewing every discrimination complaint filed in the past 10 years across our entire system." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "That's a start. But firing people is easy. What are you doing to fix the culture that allowed this to happen?" "That's why I wanted to meet with you," Jennifer said. "I need your help." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "My help? You run a successful company. You understand systems and culture. You've obviously thought about these issues deeply, having experienced them yourself. I want to know what real change looks like. Not cosmetic changes. Not checking boxes. Real, meaningful transformation." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity. He had been in enough meetings to know when someone was trying to manage him. But Jennifer seemed genuinely open, genuinely concerned. "Real change starts with accountability," Marcus said. "Not just punishing individuals after problems occur, but building systems that prevent problems in the first place. You need independent oversight of discrimination complaints. You need transparent reporting of incidents. You need consequences that matter." "Agreed," Jennifer said, making notes. "What else?" "Training. And I don't mean a 3-hour seminar that employees sit through once a year and forget about. I mean ongoing, meaningful education about bias, privilege, and discrimination. Training that makes people uncomfortable because real growth happens outside comfort zones." Jennifer continued writing. "We actually have diversity training currently. How effective is it?" Jennifer paused. "Honestly, not very. Most employees see it as a box to check. They sit through the videos, take the quiz, and move on. Then it needs to be completely redesigned. It needs to be interactive, discussion-based, scenario-driven. It needs to involve real stories from real passengers who have experienced discrimination. It needs to have teeth, with real consequences for people who don't take it seriously. Would you be willing to help develop something like that?" Jennifer asked. Marcus considered the question. He had a company to run. He had other responsibilities. But he also had a foundation that worked on exactly these kinds of issues, and he had a platform that could make a real difference. "My foundation specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives," Marcus said. "We've developed training programs for several major companies. We could potentially work with you on this. But I need to be clear about something." "What's that?" "This can't be about protecting your reputation or managing public relations. This has to be about genuinely caring that passengers like me, Like the 7 people who complained before me, like countless others who never complained at all, are treated with basic human dignity. If this is just damage control, I'm not interested. Jennifer met his eyes directly. I can't speak for every executive who came before me, but I can tell you that I'm personally committed to this. Not because you're an important client, although you are. Not because this story went viral, although it did. But because it's the right thing to do. Because I have a daughter, and I want her to grow up in a world where people are judged by their character, not their appearance. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, let's talk specifics. They spent the next 3 hours discussing concrete changes. Marcus outlined a comprehensive program that included mandatory bias training for all employees, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, anonymous reporting systems that tracked patterns across the entire company, regular audits of service quality broken down by passenger demographics, and a public reporting requirement that would make the airline's progress transparent. This is extensive, Jennifer said, looking at the pages of notes she had taken. And expensive. Discrimination is expensive too, Marcus replied. In legal settlements, in lost customers, in damaged reputation. But more importantly, what's the cost of human dignity? What's the cost of making people feel unsafe or unwelcome? Those costs are impossible to measure, but infinitely more important. Jennifer nodded. You're right. What about the contract between Wellington Technologies and our airline? I know it's up for renewal soon. Marcus had been waiting for this question. I've thought about pulling it, he admitted. It would send a strong message, but it would also hurt the wrong people. Your IT staff didn't discriminate against me. Your pilots didn't, your ground crew didn't. Punishing the entire company doesn't feel right. So you'll renew? On one condition. We include provisions in the contract that tie your payment to measurable progress on diversity and inclusion metrics. If you meet your goals, you pay the normal rate. If you fall short, there are financial penalties that go directly to civil rights organizations. And if you exceed your goals, you get a discount. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, processing this unusual proposal. I've never heard of a contract structured that way. Maybe it's time to start, Marcus said. Put your money where your mouth is. Show that this matters enough to build it into your core business operations. I'll need to discuss this with our board, Jennifer said. But personally, I think it's brilliant. It creates real accountability. They talked for another hour about implementation timelines, resource allocation, and communication strategies. By the time Marcus left the building, they had the framework for a comprehensive transformation plan. As Marcus drove home, his phone rang. It was his publicist. Marcus, every major news outlet wants an interview. What do you want me to tell them? Marcus thought about it. Tell them I'll do one interview. One. I want to choose an outlet that will treat this seriously, not sensationalize it. I want to focus on systemic change, not personal revenge. I have the perfect person, his publicist said. Sarah Chen from the Business Journal. She's been covering this story with real depth. She understands the bigger picture. Set it up, Marcus agreed. The interview was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the story continued to evolve. More passengers came forward with their experiences. Some were recent, some were from years ago. The airline was facing intense scrutiny from the public and the press, but something interesting was happening too. Other airlines were watching carefully. Several announced they were reviewing their own policies on discrimination. Industry organizations were discussing new standards. The conversation was spreading beyond one company to the entire airline industry. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James, the flight attendant who had witnessed everything. It was simple. Thank you for not staying silent. Marcus smiled and texted back. Thank you for your support that day. It mattered. At the airline, Jennifer was meeting with her executive team to discuss Marcus's proposals. Some executives were resistant. These requirements are too strict, the CFO argued. The financial penalties could be significant. Good, Jennifer said. That means we'll be motivated to meet our goals. But what if this sets a precedent? What if other clients start demanding similar provisions? Then maybe we should be doing this across the board anyway, Jennifer replied. Maybe we shouldn't need contract provisions to do the right thing. But if that's what it takes to create accountability, then that's what we'll do. The board meeting to discuss the proposals was contentious. Some board members worried about costs. Others worried about liability. A few worried about setting precedents that could complicate other business relationships. But there were also board members who supported the changes. One older board member spoke up near the end of the meeting. "I've been on this board for 20 years, he said. "I've seen us face many challenges, but this is the first time I've seen an opportunity to be true leaders in our industry. We can be the first airline to take this seriously, to build these systems to prove that profitability and principle can coexist, or we can be followers who only change when forced to. I know which legacy I want to leave." The board voted to approve the comprehensive plan and the new contract structure with Wellington Technologies. Jennifer called Marcus with the news. "The board approved everything. We're moving forward with all of it." "That's good to hear," Marcus said. "But the real test will be in the implementation. Talk is easy. Action is hard." "I know," Jennifer said. "That's why I want to establish quarterly meetings between our teams to review progress. I want full transparency. If we're falling short, I want to know immediately so we can correct course." "Agreed," Marcus said. "And I want those quarterly reports to be made public. Not just shared internally, but posted on your website for anyone to see. Real accountability requires visibility." Jennifer hesitated only briefly. "Okay, we'll do it." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his home office and thought about how far things had come in just a few weeks. From a humiliating flight experience to a comprehensive plan for systemic change. From one flight attendant's discrimination to an industry-wide conversation about equality and respect. His wife came in with dinner on a tray. "Still working?" "Just finished," Marcus said, closing his laptop. "We did it. They're implementing everything." She sat down next to him. "I'm proud of you. You could have just been angry and walked away. Instead, you're creating change that will help people you'll never meet." "That's the only way this was worth it," Marcus said. "The anger and hurt I felt on that plane, if it only serves my own need for justice, then what's the point? But if it prevents even one other person from feeling that way, then maybe it meant something." The interview with Sarah Chen happened the following Tuesday. Marcus sat in his office as she set up her recording equipment. She had thoughtful questions prepared. Questions that went beyond the surface story to the deeper issues. "Why didn't you identify yourself when the flight attendant was questioning you?" Sarah asked. "Because my identity shouldn't have mattered," Marcus replied. "Every passenger deserves respect, whether they're a CEO or a college student or a retired teacher." The problem wasn't that she didn't know who I was. The problem was that she made assumptions based on how I looked, and those assumptions led her to treat me as less than human. "You could have sued the airline for a lot of money." "Why didn't you?" "Because money doesn't change systems. I have enough money. What I wanted was to ensure this doesn't happen to others. You can't sue your way to equality. You have to build it into the structure of institutions." The interview lasted 2 hours. Sarah asked about his childhood, his experiences with racism throughout his life, his thoughts on progress and setbacks. Marcus was honest and thoughtful, avoiding sound bites in favor of nuanced discussion. When the article published a week later, it became one of the most read pieces in the business journal's history. It sparked conversations in boardrooms and living rooms across the country. It wasn't just about airlines anymore. It was about how society treats people, how institutions respond to discrimination, how individuals can create change. 6 months had passed since that difficult flight from New York to Los Angeles. Marcus sat in a large conference room at the airline's headquarters, looking at the progress report spread across the table. The transformation had begun and the results were starting to show. Jennifer Hastings sat across from him, along with her executive team and members of Marcus's foundation, who had been working on implementing the new training program. The quarterly review meeting had become something Marcus actually looked forward to. Not because the work was easy, but because he could see real change happening. "Let's start with the numbers," Jennifer said, pulling up a presentation on the large screen. "We've now trained 82,000 of our 90,000 employees in the new diversity and inclusion program. The remaining 8,000 are scheduled for training over the next 6 weeks." Marcus nodded, studying the data. The training his foundation had developed was intensive. It required 2 full days of participation, including small group discussions, role-playing exercises, and presentations from passengers who had experienced discrimination. No one could simply watch videos and call it done. "What's the feedback been like?" Marcus asked. The head of human resources spoke up. "Honestly, it's been mixed. Some employees have embraced it completely. They've told us it opened their eyes to biases they didn't know they had. Others have been resistant, saying it's unnecessary or that they're already treating everyone fairly. That's expected, Marcus said. Real change makes people uncomfortable. The question is whether that discomfort is leading to growth or just resistance. We're seeing growth, Jennifer said. Our discrimination complaints have actually increased in the past 6 months. The room went quiet. An executive named Thomas looked confused. That seems like a bad thing. Shouldn't complaints be going down? Marcus shook his head. Not necessarily. Increased complaints often mean people feel safer reporting incidents. It means the system is working better, not worse. The real question is how those complaints are being handled. Jennifer pulled up another slide. Every single complaint now goes to our independent review board. The board consists of 5 members, 3 of whom are external to the company, including a civil rights attorney and a diversity consultant. They review every case thoroughly and make binding recommendations. And those recommendations are being followed? Marcus asked. Every single one, Jennifer confirmed. We've terminated 12 employees for discriminatory behavior. We've suspended or demoted 37 others. And we've identified systemic issues in certain hubs where the culture was particularly problematic. Marcus looked at the data carefully. The airline was serious about this. They weren't just paying lip service. They were making hard decisions that cost money and caused short-term disruptions. That was real commitment. What about the passenger experience? Marcus asked. Are we seeing improvements there? The head of customer service pulled up survey data. We've been tracking satisfaction scores by demographic groups. 6 months ago, passengers of color rated their experience an average of 6.3 out of 10. White passengers rated it 8.1. That gap was concerning. And now, passengers of color are now rating their experience 7.8 out of 10. White passengers are at 8.3. The gap has shrunk significantly. We still have work to do, but the trend is moving in the right direction. Marcus felt a genuine sense of accomplishment. These weren't just numbers. Behind every improved rating was a real person who felt more respected, more welcome, more valued. That mattered. I want to talk about something else, Jennifer said, her tone becoming more serious. We need to address Rebecca Morrison. The room became uncomfortable. Rebecca's name had become shorthand for everything that had gone wrong. But Marcus had been thinking about her lately. What about her? Marcus asked. She's been trying to find work in the service industry, Jennifer said. Obviously no airline will hire her. Her story is too well known. She's applied to hotels, restaurants, cruise lines. Everyone turns her down. That's her consequence, Thomas said. She brought this on herself. I'm not disagreeing, Jennifer said. But I've been thinking about accountability versus redemption. Is the goal to punish her forever? Or is there a path for someone like her to learn and grow? Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the question. He had spent a lot of time thinking about Rebecca over the past months. He had been angry at her, certainly. But as time passed, he had also thought about the system that had allowed her behavior to continue for so long. The supervisors who had dismissed complaints. The culture that had failed to correct her biases. What are you proposing? Marcus asked. I'm not sure yet, Jennifer admitted. But if we truly believe people can change through education and accountability, shouldn't that apply to everyone? Even Rebecca Morrison? The room was silent. Everyone was watching Marcus, waiting for his response. He was the one who had been hurt. His opinion mattered most. I think redemption is possible, Marcus said slowly. But it has to be earned. Rebecca would need to demonstrate real understanding of what she did wrong. Real commitment to change. Real work to undo the harm she caused. I'm not interested in easy forgiveness that lets someone off the hook. But if she's willing to do the hard work, then maybe there's a path forward, Jennifer nodded. I'll reach out to her, see if she's willing to participate in intensive training, therapy if needed, and community service work with civil rights organizations. If she completes that successfully, maybe we can help her find a path forward. Not with us, but somewhere. Marcus appreciated Jennifer's thoughtfulness. This wasn't about being soft on discrimination. It was about believing that people could change, that accountability and growth could coexist. The meeting continued for another hour, covering various aspects of the transformation. They discussed changes to hiring practices to increase diversity among employees. They talked about creating employee resource groups for staff of color. They reviewed plans for ongoing training and education. As the meeting wrapped up, Jennifer asked Marcus to stay for a moment. After everyone else left, she closed the door. I wanted to tell you something privately, she said. This work we've been doing, it's changed me. Before this happened, I thought I was aware of these issues. I thought I understood discrimination. But I didn't, not really. Working on this has forced me to confront my own biases, my own privileges. It's been uncomfortable and necessary. That's the work, Marcus said simply. We all have biases. The question is whether we're willing to examine them and change. I also wanted you to know that other airlines are watching what we're doing, Jennifer continued. 3 of our competitors have reached out asking about our program. The Industry Trade Association wants us to present at their annual conference. What started as one company addressing one incident is becoming a movement. Marcus smiled. That's what I hoped for. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It spreads when people see it's possible. A week later, Marcus was invited to speak at the airline's annual employee conference. Thousands of flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, and other staff gathered in a large convention center. Marcus stood backstage feeling nervous in a way he hadn't felt in years. Speaking to business executives was easy, but speaking to the actual employees who did the daily work of serving passengers felt different. More important somehow. Jennifer introduced him, explaining the journey the company had been on over the past 6 months. She spoke honestly about the failures that had allowed discrimination to continue. She praised employees who had embraced the changes and challenged those who were still resistant. Then Marcus walked onto the stage. The applause was respectful but measured. Many employees probably knew who he was now. They knew his story. Some were likely wondering what he would say. 6 months ago, I had one of the worst flight experiences of my life, Marcus began. I was humiliated, profiled, and treated as if I didn't belong in a seat I had paid for. It hurt. Not just my pride, but my sense of dignity as a human being. The room was completely silent. Everyone was listening. But I'm not here today to talk about that pain. I'm here to talk about what we've done with it. I'm here to talk about how we've turned something terrible into something meaningful. Marcus spoke for 30 minutes. He talked about his own experiences with discrimination throughout his life. He talked about the importance of treating every passenger with dignity. He talked about unconscious bias and how it affects everyone. He talked about the courage it takes to look at yourself honestly and change. Some of you probably think this training is unnecessary, Marcus said. You probably think you already treat everyone fairly. And maybe you do. But I would challenge you to really examine that assumption, to think about the snap judgments you make when you see someone, to notice if you're a little more friendly with some passengers than others, to ask yourself if you're applying the same standards to everyone. He paused, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. The flight attendant who discriminated against me wasn't a monster. She was a regular person who let her biases control her behavior. We all have biases, every single one of us. The difference is whether we're willing to acknowledge them and work to overcome them. After his speech, Marcus answered questions from employees. A young flight attendant raised her hand. How did you stay calm during that flight? She asked. If someone treated me that way, I would have lost it. Marcus smiled sadly. I've had a lot of practice. As a black man in America, I've been in situations like that more times than I can count. You learn to control your anger because showing it will only make things worse. You learn to document everything because your word will be questioned. You learn to stay calm because that's the only way people will listen. It's exhausting, but it's survival. The room was quiet. Many employees looked uncomfortable, which Marcus thought was good. Discomfort meant they were really hearing him. Another employee asked, Do you think we've done enough? Do you think the changes are working? I think you've made real progress, Marcus said honestly. But this isn't a problem you solve once and move on. This requires constant attention, constant vigilance, constant work. The question isn't whether you've done enough. The question is whether you're committed to continuing the work. After the conference, several employees approached Marcus privately. Some thanked him for speaking up. Some shared their own experiences with discrimination, either as victims or as witnesses who hadn't known what to do. Some admitted they had been skeptical of the changes but were starting to see their value. James, the flight attendant who had been on Marcus's original flight, was there. He had tears in his eyes as he shook Marcus's hand. Thank you, James said. I've been flying for 5 years and I've seen so much discrimination. I never knew what to do about it. I felt powerless. But you've shown me that speaking up matters. That one voice can create real change. Your voice mattered too, Marcus told him. You were willing to testify about what you saw. That took courage. On the drive home, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed in 6 months. He had gone from a tired businessman just trying to get home to an advocate for systemic change in an entire industry. It wasn't a role he had sought, but it was one he had grown into. His phone rang. It was a reporter from a national news program. "Mr. Wellington, we're doing a special on discrimination in the travel industry. We'd love to include your story and talk about the changes you've helped create." Marcus agreed to the interview. The more attention this work received, the more pressure other companies would feel to make similar changes. That was good. That was how movements grew. 3 weeks later, the first public quarterly report was posted on the airline's website. It detailed everything: complaint numbers, resolution rates, training completion percentages, satisfaction scores by demographic group. The transparency was unprecedented in the industry. Some people criticized the airline for admitting to problems, but more people praised them for their honesty and their commitment to change. Other airlines started receiving pressure from their own passengers to release similar data. Marcus's contract with the airline was officially renewed, with the new provisions tying payment to diversity metrics. The business press covered it extensively, calling it innovative and suggesting other companies should adopt similar approaches. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Marcus sat in his backyard with his family. His wife was reading a book. His teenage son was doing homework. His daughter was playing with their dog. It was peaceful and normal and perfect. His son looked up from his textbook. "Dad, we're studying civil rights in school. My teacher asked if you would come speak to our class about what happened and what you've done since." Marcus smiled. "I'd be happy to. She said you're an example of how one person can make a difference, of how standing up for what's right can create change beyond what you imagined." Marcus thought about that. 6 months ago, he had just wanted to file a complaint. He had wanted one flight attendant to face consequences. He hadn't imagined any of what came after. The viral story, the industry-wide conversations, the comprehensive transformation program, the quarterly reports, the speaking engagements, the movement toward transparency and accountability. "I don't know if I'm a hero," Marcus said to his son. "I just did what felt right in the moment. I spoke up when I could have stayed silent. I pushed for real change when I could have just taken an apology and moved on. That's all. That's everything," his wife said, looking up from her book. "Most people don't do those things. They stay silent because it's easier. They accept apologies and move on because it requires less energy. You chose the harder path. That matters." Marcus looked at his family, feeling grateful and tired and hopeful all at once. The work wasn't done. It would never really be done. But progress had been made. Real measurable progress. And that was worth celebrating. His phone buzzed with an email. It was from Jennifer Hastings. The subject line read, "Something you should see." Marcus opened the email. Jennifer had forwarded him a message from a passenger named Tanya Wilson. Tanya was a young black woman who had just flown first class for the first time. She wrote about how nervous she had been, worried about being questioned or treated poorly, but the flight attendants had been wonderful. Professional, friendly, respectful. She had felt truly welcome. "I know you probably won't see this," Tanya's message said, "but I wanted someone at the airline to know that your changes are working. For the first time ever, I flew without anxiety about my skin color. I was just another passenger. Just another person. That's all I ever wanted to be." Marcus read the message twice, then a third time. This was why it had all been worth it. Not for recognition or praise, but for that one person who felt a little more comfortable, a little more welcome, a little more human. He closed his phone and looked at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. His daughter ran past chasing the dog, her laughter filling the air. His son was still studying, occasionally glancing up to ask questions. His wife had moved closer, her hand finding his. In this moment, everything felt right. The work would continue. There would be more challenges, more resistance, more setbacks, but there would also be more Tanya Wilsons, more people who felt seen and respected, more instances of dignity honored rather than denied, and that made all the difference in the world.